So everyone okay with the recording? Yeah, cool. So I think, thank you everyone for coming to our symposium on conserving mountain biodiversity to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It's really nice to bring our team together. And yeah, what I thought we'd do is to just recap very quickly. I mean, you can see all of our pre-recorded talks. We're not going to go in detail through them. We thought we'd do just a recap to refresh ourselves of what we did and as a starting point. So what do we work on? We work on mountains. Mountains cover 12% of the world's surface outside of Antarctica. And they are beautiful and complex ecosystems where many diverse communities live and depend critically on the benefits provided by nature. And yeah, what we have is together we have a range of approaches across across the world's mountains. So using expert surveys, literature, and field work. And these are some of the areas in which we approach. Yes, and please mute whoever is not speaking, please mute yourself. And so just to recap a bit briefly, so what we're going to do is I'm going to present some global work, then we're going to move to Bolivia, to Tanzania, to Nepal, and then back to global at Jonas. And when I get to your slides, I'll mute myself and ask the next person to speak ourselves. So what we're seeing is we asked experts what's happening in the world's mountains, and most habitats are declining except in modified ecosystems and except forests in Europe. But yeah, Himalayas, East African Andes, where we're all going to present work, habitats are declining. And in Andes, East African Himalaya, we're seeing strong reductions or small reductions in ecosystem services provided by those benefits. And it's in the European Alps that you see more positive contributions, and it's no coincidence that's also where you see less decline of habitats. And yeah, I'm going to turn over to Karina. Would you like to say a few words just to refresh everyone?
Unmute yourself.
Okay, I was saying hi to everyone. And yeah, about Bolivia, where is one of the case of the study in the project, it's nice to say that in Bolivia there is a framework, a national and legal framework talking about the living well as a civilization proposal. This focus is especially how the human beings relation with interact with nature. And yeah, we have principles, special principles, and also this philosophy came from the ancestor cosmovision, ancestor cultures. And we can recognize also the living well principles in the local governance. That's why in the study case, we did an approach about this cosmovision. And like I said before, the most special thing it is how humans are connected with Mother Earth. And that is interesting to analyze when we are analyzing how to better conserve or better take care of nature and all the components from Mother Earth. In Bolivia, we have a law of rights of Mother Earth, and it's the main framework, legal framework, to make all the planning in all the levels in the state. I think that is the most important thing about living well. Also, we did in the field work some questionnaires and to recognize how is the local perception about interactions. We did 26 household interviews as a part of the field work. Also, we did stakeholders workshops, participatory stakeholders workshops and also in-depth interviews with key actors. And just to share some of the main results about, for example, the local perception, this question is really interesting. Do you believe that the mountain, water, forest, nature is alive? As you see in the graphic, almost all the respondents say yes, and that's interesting because it's something that came from this ancestral culture. And to say life is not just in a biophysical way, is also most of them, they maintain some rituals to connect and to talk with nature. About the perception of the effect of changes in nature of the food sustainability, also most of the respondents, they can perceive that the changes in nature affect directly to the food supply. And about how do you perceive the personal health depends on the health of nature, and also they say most of the people answer yes, and this was interesting talking about the COVID context. They recognize that if nature is healthy, also people can be healthy.
Maybe Adhikari, could you talk briefly about your ecosystem services research? So how mountain ecosystems in Tanzania? We're just doing brief recaps of, for those who are joining, we're just doing brief recaps of the discussion. Adhikari, are you there? I don't know if yeah, I think you're. I mean, I'll say that Adhikari has done some research on ecosystem services in the North Pare Mountains. Adhikari, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to carry on?
Adhikari seems to be connected. I saw him, but not sure whether he's around.
So Adhikari, I see you talking, but I don't hear you.
He's talking. Hello, not Adhikari. Munishi is talking.
You hear
I don't hear. Okay, yeah.
Adhikari, we hear you now. Yes.
I think it's a network problem. Yeah. So we did the perception-based assessment study on the North Pare Mountains. Yeah. So as you can see, I've prepared the new slides. Maybe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's okay.
Yeah.
We just have some joint slides. Yeah.
Maybe I can use that.
Yeah. Oh, can you just, in the interest of time, can you just talk, like, it's not to give the presentation, it's just to give a quick recap of what
yeah. So we surveyed the 4 ecosystem services as per Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and in the North Pare, the provisioning services are highly perceived, followed by regulating services, cultural services, while supporting services are least perceived. And the most perceived provisioning services were freshwater, food crops, livestock fodder, fuel wood, timber, and medicinal plants. Yeah. Maybe next slides. Hello.
Sorry. Adhikari, did you have maybe one final conclusion from Tanzania, and then we'll move to Nepal, just to keep it quick.
Okay. As I've said, the most perceived ecosystem services were provisioning, and the major drivers of the ecosystem change, because we were looking on the ecosystem services, drivers of change, and their utility. Okay. For the most perceived ecosystem services were provisioning services. This applies to their utility also. The 3 major ecosystem services that attain 100% utility consensus were freshwater, food, and firewood.
Okay, so those are the most.
And the drivers of change, yeah, the drivers change, majority of the respondents agreed that the habitat loss and conversions were the major drivers that cause that alter ecosystem services.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. So just to keep it quick, we're going to move to Nepal, and Biraj, over to you, Biraj.
Yeah. So just recapping what our objectives were for Nepal, as well as for Bolivia and Tanzania. Our objectives were to see what the state of how nature contributes to the sustainable development goals, or how ecosystem services or nature's contributions to people, they contribute to the sustainable development goals. And for Nepal, I started off with a different approach. So I couldn't go to the field because of the COVID. So I started off by doing like a very detailed literature review, trying to understand how where the researches were being done for nature's contribution to people or ecosystem services, and trying to figure out how these ecosystem services were contributing to sustainable development goals in Nepal. So as you can see with the literature review, we collected literature from all over Nepal, as you can see in the figure there. And I've given a detailed presentation on the on-demand section. So if you're interested, you can check it out. But two of the main takeaway messages was that these ecosystem services or nature's contribution, as you can see in the right figure, they're declining all over the country. As you can see with the red bars indicating reports that said these ecosystem services were declining, and declines in ecosystems were more reported than increases. And then in the next slide, however, these ecosystem services or nature's contribution to people, they were essential to contribute to 12 different SDGs directly. The take-home message here is that urgent action needs to be taken in order to make sure that Nepal reaches its objectives for the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. I'm just curious about, are we supposed to stay here or going to the other live stream, Graham? Because I have the other live stream on my ears too.
So the challenge I have is that to do a live stream, I would need to be logged in as a host and then share it in live stream, but the username credential they gave me doesn't let me log in as a Zoom user. So I thought it was just more effective to.
I understood that, but I mean, because some people are in that room, in that official room, and
Well, tell them
for us.
to, yeah, just tell them to join in the Q&A, as we've said.
Probably Biraj can just do that so I can fill up with the slides.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, hello from my side too. Thanks for the previous introductions. What we did now here, and well, you can see all the details in the talk, and we're preparing a publication on it too. We did a cross-scale analysis on what SDGs need priority throughout the world's mountain regions to, in the end, successfully implement in the hopefully have a better chance of implementing all SDGs or achieving all SDGs. So we had 166 responses on the lowest level, sort of saying, that's the black dots, and then we scaled up through a factor analysis through the IPBES sub-regions to the IPBES regions, and then did a meta scale on the global level. And now, please, next slide. So on the bottom, on the lowest level of mountain regions, we came to the conclusion that the Central Andes has the highest priority need in SDG number 4, 2, and 1. In the Northern Andes, there's highest priority in SDG 15, 6, and 4. So biodiversity is highly important here. In the European Alps, there is SDGs 12, 13, and 15. And in the Himalayas, it's SDG 13, 1, and 7. And then through scaling that up, I don't go to detail to the intermediate levels, just directly jump to the global scale. Then we have the major priority, or the main priority SDGs for the global level of SDG 4, quality education, SDG 3, health, and climate action, number 13. As you can see in the bar below, then the next ones are biodiversity, SDG 15, and freshwater, SDG 6. So yeah, throughout the different scales and depending on what people think is important, it's clearly, yeah, we are clearly able to identify SDG 4, 3, and 13 as highest priority. Thanks. Any questions and discussions coming now, I guess?
So yeah, thanks everyone. So yeah, so we just wanted to give you a quick, so yeah, sorry for the confusion about Zoom rooms. I hope you found this okay. And are there any questions? I guess if not, I will kick off with a suggestion. So Jonas found that education and climate action were and health were particularly key SDGs to prioritize. Do you think that resonates with your Bolivia, Nepal, and Tanzania case studies? I guess Karina, Biraj, or Adili, do you have any thoughts? Oh, and yeah, sorry, we also have a question from Rob Marchant. Please ask.
Do you want to ask the question now, or do you want to?
Yes, yeah, please go for it, and then we'll.
Okay, yeah. So it was just. So we've been doing some work with IPCC around global communities and response to climate change, and clearly, as you can imagine, mountains are very much at the brunt of some of the climate change issues and those mountain communities. And I just wondered if there was any insights from this group around maybe the use of ecosystem services, nature-based solutions, and how that's maybe changing in response to an enhanced climate variability. If there's any sort of nexus between that sort of climate change challenge and you know, changing provisioning services or reliance on different types of services.
Yes, so I'll start quickly with a Kilimanjaro example. So I didn't present it here, but it's in the uploaded talk. So we asked people we did a sort of IPBES style assessment of Kilimanjaro and what's been happening. And we saw pretty clear trends that water provisioning services were declining in particular, and it's through just not just climate change, but the synergy of climate change, demographic pressure, and increased resource competition. So clearly what we found is that, yeah, and I think in general, people, I didn't show this as well, but globally and in the Kilimanjaro example, people rated land use change as more important than climate change, although of course it's both happening at the same time. And we have the issue where if you do short-term assessments, it's really land use change or sometimes invasive species, but long-term it's climate change. But I think the ecosystem services approach did resonate with people, and worryingly in Kilimanjaro, everyone expected all ecosystem services to decline in provision in the next 10 years. And so, yeah, I think clearly it's a good framework for helping people to understand that they benefit from nature and create mobilization for it. Yeah, anyone else from the speakers want to jump in with that? So how has climate change resilience, or how has discourse around climate change melded with ecosystem services? Great. Anyone? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Otherwise, I see Lee.
Yeah, thank you. Greetings from the Rocky Mountain steppe, which I love the mountains. And we have a way of working with water in the acequias, which broaden the alluvial plain. And of course, the Rocky Mountains are very, very dry. And this provides also an ecosystem service in the way that, if we're broadening the plain, we can support, pathways for wildlife, and which has worked in harmony in this area for centuries. And I'm wondering if there are any ways that local populations and these other mountain communities are working, integrating traditional agricultural practices that that bolster the surrounding ecology.
Maybe this is a good question for Karina.
Yes, well, in the area that I've been doing the research, the ancestral cultural is not so strong like in the Andean part, for example, the Andean regions. But anyway, there is still some rituals to the water, for example, and it's nice to see how they still connect, talking the water when there is dry seasons or when it's raining too much. They make some offers to connect with the water. And yeah, in the agricultural calendar, also there are some special local parties to say thanks to the water and to ask also the abundance of water. So it's nice. But anyway, the pressure of the intensive agriculture is more strong now, and we perceive that these traditional practices are losing little by little. Anyway, there are some other groups of communities that are coming from this part, from the Andes, and they help to remember these traditions. And yeah, but it's little by little it's more weak, this way to connect, especially with water and with the agriculture calendar.
Thanks, Karina. So Prof. Minishi, you had a hand raised. No? Okay.
I think he's just trying to unmute himself. Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Probably you can unmute him.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, sure. Thank you very much for everybody. In Tanzanian context, the mountains have two parts which contribute much to ecosystem services. And actually, if we look at all the mountains, and we worked in the Pare Mountains, worked in the Uluguru, and the Kilimanjaro, somehow we'll be working in Kilimanjaro, but my experience also, that the upper part of all the mountains are water towers, and they are catchment forests which are conserved for water provisioning. The middle to the lower part are mostly agro-ecosystems. And to me, we are seeing, even what Adil has, that the major ecosystem services fall into water provisioning as relates to the natural forests that are managed at the top of the mountains. And in the middle and the lower parts of the mountains, we are seeing agricultural production as the major contributor to ecosystem services. Others come in relation to whatever is contributed by food or crop production and water provisioning. And we can say that the two ecosystem services related to water and its multiplier effects, as well as agro-ecosystems and the crop production, are an important contributor to SDGs and livelihoods. That's all.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we had a question from David Williams in the chat. Very good one. What extent do you think the challenges in mountains are unique to mountains? How do they differ from other ecosystem services? So I'll say a few words on that and then open it up to the other panelists. So in some ways, they're often very similar to the pressures elsewhere. So where humans depend on nature, but are undermining its capacity to keep on providing benefits for us that depend on our well-being. We see land use change, climate change as major issues. I think some of what kind of makes mountains unique is that you have such topographic, by definition, you have the topographic variations. You have so many different habitat types effectively next to each other. So I think it's easier to see the sort of telecouplings between different habitats. And then you also have interesting trade-offs between some of the services that mountain produce are kind of benefited, are benefits that go to downstream communities, or protection from natural hazards, water provision. So, whereas actually, so you kind of get interesting trade-offs between who benefits from, you know, on the one hand, lowland communities need conservation in mountains, but the conservation measures often impose constraints on what mountain communities can, how mountain communities can go about their livelihood. So I think in that sense, but I mean, and those are problems globally, and we haven't done an explicit comparison, but I think it's the relief, the nature of mountains kind of brings those into starker relief. I guess, Jonas, do you think if you did the global SDG prioritization example for non-mountains, would you see similar results?
It's a very good question indeed, which we thought about doing as a follow-up actually. Well, I guess it comes down to, in mountains, it's more probably, or that's an assumption now, it's more indigenous and local people living, especially in those areas where we have the R4D case studies, rather than when you have a look at the lowlands. Of course, there's also rural areas, but there's more bigger cities too. So you might have more those economic and social SDG or socially relevant SDGs that are needed there too. So for example, when you have a look at the Central and Western European level, one of the levels I skipped in my short presentation now, but it's included in the video, that you can see that in Europe, there's the sustainable production and consumption SDG much higher ranked than the others. So depending on, of course, where you are in the world, and then whether you are in the mountains or not, so the differences are based on development, probably, are based on how much biodiversity you have within a certain area. And I guess as it comes to lowlands or uplands, it also comes down to how much civilization there is and how far the people are developed. But I guess Biraj also can complement on that.
We'll hear from Biraj and then from Prof. Mani.
Yeah, I guess especially in the context of Nepal, one of the things that makes mountains unique is that it's very geographically inaccessible. And because of that, the very basic necessities that we consider as development, they don't reach to the people living there. So as a result, people's livelihoods very much depend on the ecosystems there. So for example, food, water, shelter, etc., energy are very much intertwined with nature and the services that they provide. And as a result, it makes people more vulnerable for global changes like climate change, for example. And I think that's the major challenge. Even in terms of conservation, apart from this literature review that I'm doing, I'm also interviewing some conservationists and experts in the field, asking them about the challenges at conservation. And one of the major things that they talk about is inaccessibility, geographic inaccessibility. And I guess like these are few of the reasons that I can think from the top of my head that makes mountains unique.
Yep.
Yeah, Professor Mani.
Can I say something? In fact, there are issues in the mountains ecosystems. One has been said in terms of accessibility, and actually most of these are forgotten compared to the lowland areas, because the mountains seem to be hidden somewhere up there, and the communities in there are probably not as important as people in towns in the cities, in the lowlands. So this is an issue in terms of accessibility and the perception of what the importance of the population up there. The second one is the question of population. In fact, most of these mountains have high rainfall, one, and therefore relatively productive, and they attract so much population, and the population grows to an extent that land becomes very fragmented. In one, you get very, very high population density. And therefore, the need to actually look for improving productivity rather than increasing an area for production in terms of, especially in the agro ecosystems, is very important. And remember, the mountains are conceived as protected areas, national parks, and such things. And they are putting pressure on the agro ecosystems. And these people here really get squeezed in very small pieces of land where they need to produce for a living. And those are issues that really should be considered in terms of, I'm not sure, maybe in terms of looking for how to improve productivity on the land to produce as much as possible from small areas. Otherwise, we do some sort of maybe migration. The population is increasing, the area remains stagnant. What do we do? And if you do some sort of movement, migration of people to other areas, where do you settle them? Sometimes culturally, they might not be feasible and such things. And that has happened in Tanzania in the past, where people actually in the high population areas in the mountains were asked to move in the lowlands where there is ample land. But I am sure more than 70% of those people who moved down there came back to the mountains, and they are still there until today. So those are the things that we really have to consider. How can we make productivity higher on small pieces of land that are becoming too fragmented due to increasing population and such things? Thank you.
So a question from Lee. How are agroecosystems integrating native foodways as a way to bolster ecosystem services while feeding local populations? Maybe Adhikari, does your research from North Pari talk about agro? Can you talk a bit about agroforests and agroecosystems?
For example, in North Pari Mountains, they've adopted these agroecosystems where they cultivate crops together with trees. Yeah? They cultivate much of the food crops within these mountains. So they depend on food production, on their livelihood from food that are produced within the agroforestry. It's low productivity that are done out of the agro-ecosystem in the North Pari, in the lowlands. It's only for paddy. But in the upland there, we have several cashew crops and food crops. Yeah, for example, they were cultivating coffee in this area because the climate is favorable to them to cultivate coffee as well as banana. So you can find out that you have the crop diversity, higher crop diversity in this agro-ecosystem compared to the lowland areas, where majority of areas are like kind of monoculture, right? So when we go back to the Lily questions, how agro-ecosystem integrate native foodware as a way to bolster ecosystem services? These agro-ecosystem support several variety of ecosystem services, not only one, okay? It supports several ecosystem services. They have it's like a system that they grow with them. You can find that every household has a cow for milking, has a place to get fodder. He has a plot to plow, to cultivate banana and the likes. Are you getting me? So these agro-ecosystems, you can find that this area has higher crop diversity compared to other areas. So higher crop diversity plus the system of cultivating, you have the trees, you have the crops, you can find that you can get ecosystem services such as food. At the same time, from trees, you can get firewood or timber and poles. We have a medicinal plants. So you can find that from this crop diversity or forestic diversity within this agro ecosystem, you have variety of ecosystem services, okay? That can contribute to the well-being of people, not only food, even in economic gains. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what I can say.
Yeah, no, it's very good, and lots of good examples from Tanzania. Maybe Biraj or Karina. So, I mean, you both have. So, for instance, Biraj has found in his literature review that one of the key ways we can enhance nature's contributions to people and their conservation is by better integrating indigenous knowledge. Yeah, did that pertain specifically to food agroecosystems or to other domains, Biraj?
Well, from my analysis, yes, one of the aspects was agroecosystems, very similar to what Adili was talking about. But the other aspect was religious beliefs. And like what Karina presented before, that integrating yourself as a part of nature and treating it as, treating humans as a part of nature itself, and using that philosophy to sustainably use resources. So that's one of the major positive drivers that was bringing about positive effects in ecosystem services in Nepal.
Thanks. Oh, and sorry, we lost Karina just as I was about to ask her a question. It's unfortunate. And I thought maybe, so I'll say something. One of the things that I found very interesting and provocative from Karina's talk is that, you know, so this project, which is funded by Swiss Development Agency, was explicitly framed around the Sustainable Development Goals. But Karina argues that actually these are very kind of normative, technocratic, Western imposed objectives. I guess maybe Adili and Biraj, do you think in the Nepal, and so Karina argues that the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework are not really useful in the Nepal and Bolivia framework, in the Bolivia context. Do you think they're useful in the Nepal and Tanzania context?
Well, I think for Nepal, using Sustainable Development Goals framework is sort of, and using the monitoring systems is a good way for Nepal to move forward in some developmental goals, but it's also the way how they are reported. For example, Nepal's National Voluntary Review, they mentioned that they've moved forward in lots of indicators, including energy and food and poverty, etc. But it does not take into account these implications are. So, for example, Nepal's target in renewable energy is quite impressive, or in energy in general. They have been doing really well with meeting their targets, but one of the major consequences of that is that they're depleting ecosystems, and the monitoring system of this SDGs does not take into account these trade-offs that exist between one target and the other, and it's not quite well reflected into the monitoring systems of the reports that they generate. And long story short, I'd say like it's a good mechanism, but still more needs to be done in order to acknowledge that these trade-offs are actually there and that they must be properly addressed.
Yeah, Adili, for Tanzania, how are the Sustainable Development Goal framework useful, or if at all?
Yeah, for Tanzania, I think to reach that sustainability, you have to have the framework from the beginning. That starts from these ecosystem services. How do we use the ecosystem services, and how do we manage this? So this one is the one that will take us to reach at some point in sustainable development. Okay, so the country now is trying hard to consider that in every aspect, not only on the mountains. This happens in all other sectors that relates to the SDG. Can never synergies and tradeoffs in this SDGs and the ecosystem services. So you have to ensure that in order to meet that sustainability, which one must be considered first? Should we leave something and take this to contribute to the sustainable developments? Although we have the controversial policies in the country, yeah, that's as a policy level, where you can find that the agriculture policy say that we need to cultivate more, we need to clear land to provide food. Food productions. So you can see you have the positive impact. So I think is at the end of the day is to come with a policy brief that can state all this, so the policymaker can consider this in order to achieve sustainable developments. Because you can't achieve sustainability while you have controversies, while you have trade-offs in attaining the SDG. Yeah. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion points? If not, maybe yeah, maybe, sorry, Jonas, could you recap us what the priorities were, the priority SDGs were for globally and Andes? I think it was education and something, and then maybe the question for Nepal, Bolivia, and Tanzania is, you know, do those priorities actually, does the results of these expert surveys match what you've actually found from speaking to households in your area?
Sure, I just quickly need to then get my slides out. But in between, one thing pointed out by Prof. Manishi already regarding general sustainability or sustainable development, agroecosystems or agroecological utilities of ecosystems and the integration of indigenous and local knowledge, etc. I think one of the key issues for sustainable development, especially in rural and mountain areas, will be to use landscape that you have available in multiple ways. So of course, we have just one area of land, one unit of land available, and once that land is depleted, we cannot reuse that very simply, and cannot just move to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one, to the next one. At one point, there won't be more land, and that's why it will be key in the end, no matter where in the world, to reuse land efficiently or to have multiple uses from the start of. Regarding the SDG priority needs for the different regions, so I go to the continental, wrong presentation, sorry, to the continental level.
And while you're doing that, there's another question from Dave in the chat. How much awareness was there of SDGs in the regions? Had people heard of them? Did they care?
Yeah, so I think for Nepal, they have SDGs, they have booklets, etc. in village development communities, but the outreach is not there. So as a result, the development objectives are still there, but there's still lots to be done for the SDGs, for people to actually understand why the SDGs were conceived at the first place. And I think that's one of the objectives of this project, right, Graham? We're trying to make people understand that these are the globally accepted goals, and that these goals interact with one another, and there has to be a balance between the synergies and trade-offs between the SDGs. For now, there's only in rural areas, there's only targets that's supposed to be met, but there's no indication of how these targets can affect other targets as well. And so there is this general feeling that there's development targets to be met, but there isn't a lot of concept about sustainable development per se.
Okay. And in Tanzania?
In Tanzania, at the local level, there's no awareness. Yeah, you can find awareness maybe at the district level to the officials that are working there. Yeah, but at the local level, they don't know about SDG. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. From the district level, some officials knows to the country level. Yeah.
Okay.
But at the local level, local people have no awareness on the SDG. Yeah. Before that, I think there is some initiative that have been done on the Millennium Development Goals. Yeah. The past Millennium Development Goals before the succession of the Millennium Goals to the SDG. So some people might have the awareness on the MDG, not SDG currently. Yeah, we used to call them mkukuta, malengo ya kupunguza, I think. Yeah. So currently, yes, there is a poverty reduction strategy. So the poverty reduction strategy in the country. So they knew it as MDG. It was in the Millennium Development Goals, not the Sustainable Development Goals. So there is some initiative that must be taken for them to be aware on the SDG. Yeah, because we have several goals, 17 goals. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say it's fine to have, as Adili says, awareness is important and should boil down to the local, to the grassroots. Unfortunately, the issue is how, on one side there is knowledge, on the other side there is action. This is the major issue. You have people having so much knowledge at the higher level, at the departmental level, at the ministerial level, but then they cannot take the action to the ground to be implemented. And that's really an issue that we should be able to consider in terms of getting action on the ground in terms of implementing for the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just typing in a question. I thought it might be easier just to
phrase it.
Exactly.
Bring it forward.
So it was just building on what Manishi was saying earlier on about this sort of water tower construct, and clearly water is probably the vital sort of service that the mountains are providing, and that provision is across the landscape, across the whole landscape. And I don't know if you feel as those connections between the bigger footprint of mountains and that sort of importance of mountains in terms of maintaining water into, say, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, or we heard the other day about there's sort of Himalayan areas providing water for 2 billion people. So I don't know how people feel of that highland lowland connection, the catchment, if that's a strong enough thing in your coming through in your project.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, but maybe over to either Prof. Manishi or Adili.
Actually, I'm seeing this, Adili, can I say, I'm seeing this from the catchment forest management perspective. Although the ministries do not come together, the Ministry of Water thinks that water is just there all the time to tape. The Ministry of Natural Resources manages catchment forests for water production. That idea is there, but they never come and say, okay, we know the connection between, we really know and consider the connection between the uplands in the mountains and what we are getting in town. that is not well articulated in terms of practice. The Minister for Water deals with water tapping there, abstracting water and selling in towns. The forester or the Minister of Natural Resources manages the catchment forest, but there is no an agreement of who is who and how can we work together to ensure that we're getting the water continuously. That's the issue. Adili, you had something to say.
Rob asked you asked on the footprint, ecosystem footprint. Yeah, I think there is low awareness and knowledge on that, because most of people in towns, in big cities, they don't know where this water coming exactly, or foods they are consuming. So you can find that many of the food productions from these mountains. For example, banana. These banana are found within these mountains, in the Eastern Arc, the whole of the Eastern Arc and the Kilimanjaro. But they are sold up to the Dar es Salaam, the big cities. Okay, Dar es Salaam, Dodoma, and elsewhere. So very few can understand on the production. Many can understand on the production of food crops. For example, banana. They cannot. This banana, they are coming from Uluguru Mountains, or they are coming from Kilimanjaro. So they know. On the other hand, on water, major of the catchment provide water that are used for irrigations in the lowlands, as well as production of hydroelectric power. Okay, so I think they know. So there is these ecosystem footprints. So they see we get electricity, where do we get water? From these mountains. Yeah, but what we need is to have the clear linkage for people to have the awareness and knowledge on these consensus from the lowland and upland linkage. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
It's an excellent question, and yeah, something we need to address. So we're bringing it up. So I think we have to end now, unfortunately. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you all the panelists for participating, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.